and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today I have another project for you all, very spring in theme. I am super excited. So I found this fabric pretty recently. I'm really hoping the person under me does not start up their motorcycle, because then I will be unable to record, and it looks like they're going to do so. So I'm going to try to rush through this intro. I found this beautiful wisteria fabric recently at one of my favorite fabric resale shops called Sewn in Denver. It's on Broadway. It's a really cute shop. They have a great room, and I have this beautiful wisteria fabric. It is so cute, and the wisteria are probably going to bloom in the next week and a half here. So I want to have this dress all made up and ready to take photos with it. So that is the goal of this video. And I had a poll where I had you guys vote on 4 patterns. It was actually interesting. Instagram always gives me very different poll results than YouTube. If I remember, I'll stick them here. I think it was a 1950s pattern one on Instagram, and then this pattern here from the 1930s one on YouTube. YouTube is my majority audience. You are the people who ultimately pay for my content through ads. So I usually go with what's on YouTube unless it's like not really what I want to make. But this here is this beautiful 1930s pattern. It's very reminiscent actually of the one I'm wearing. I believe this one's from 1 year before. This one here has like a, I don't know if you can tell, there's like a bust start and then it has a gathering here. This one's a little different. The sleeve pattern's very similar. However, the rest of it's different. I'm going to do it without the collar. And then it has this waistband here, and it's gathered into the waistband from both the bodice and the skirt. This one is that I'm wearing, not that you can see it. I'll link the video that I made this in about last year around this time. But this one here is just quite a different cut for the main bodice of the dress, although the dresses feel is very much the same. I am so pumped about making this. I think it's going to be really, really cute. This is a Hollywood pattern. Hollywood patterns are my favorite from the 1930s and 40s. I just think they have like the cutest silhouettes and the most unique patterns. This one is honoring Ida Lupino. I actually don't know who that is, so I'll have to look that up. The descriptions are: a wide midsection joins the dirndl skirt to the gathered blouse, front buttons from neck to hem, front instep length or shorter with an optional flat collar and short puffed sleeves, fabric suggestions, blah, blah, blah. I have decided my buttons. I don't think you're going to be able to see these far away. You'll see them later in the video, but they're these little white flower buttons, because what I've decided I'm going to do is here on the waistband, I'm going to go ahead and do the waistband with some piping on it too, as well as the sleeve. These guys, just because I think it'll be cute. I think the other difference on the sleeves is the sleeve is kind of more like a tulip shape, where it kind of cuts diagonally across my arm. These I think are going to be very like across my arm, but we'll see if I'm correct in that like guess. Yeah, I'm really excited. I think this is going to turn out really cute. Oh, it does have pockets on the pattern. I wasn't sure, and I am going to do the pockets. The goal is basically for this to be a one-day make. We'll see how well I accomplish that. I always cut the fabric on a different day, one day sewing make. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into cutting out all this fabric. As always, I am first starting out by cutting out my pattern pieces. I love unprinted patterns. They're my favorite because they have holes for where you can mark your darts and things, and I just think it works so much better than a printed pattern. This is simple enough. I have plenty of fabric yardage, so this overall was just pretty easy. And while you enjoy this fast-paced video of me cutting, I just want to remind you that I do have a Ko-Fi where you can go buy me a coffee. I always really appreciate it. I put a lot of time and love into this channel, as well as my own money, so it's always helpful if you have a little extra to spare there. But back to cutting. The last step of cutting here is I actually, whenever I'm using like rectangles, I tend to rip my fabric to the right size because it's just easier, and I'm lazy and I don't really actually enjoy cutting with scissors. So that is what you're seeing me do here. Alright, good morning. It is the next day after cutting out this fabric. It took a little longer than I expected. It took about an hour and 15 minutes to cut out the fabric, which I just wouldn't have anticipated given it was a fairly straightforward pattern, so maybe I'm off my game. Not sure why that took so long. But yeah, today is the goal is to sew most of the dress. I realized that the buttons are actually, there's 17 buttons, so I do not anticipate being able to finish the whole thing today, because I don't know that I have the stamina to hand sew 17 buttons in one sitting. But otherwise, yeah, the goal is pretty much to get as much done as I can. I don't really have that many days. I only really have today and maybe a couple hours tomorrow to complete this with how busy my weekend is. Today I am starting, it is almost 9:30 a.m., which is about a half hour earlier than I start, and now with the sun setting around 8. That means I have about like 11 hours today. I probably won't sew those whole 11 hours because it would not be great for my health. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious to see how quickly I can get through this dress while still, of course, doing everything up to my normal standards. Yeah, I haven't really selected what I'll be listening to. Last night I did less work than I planned because I started watching the Queen Charlotte Bridgerton spinoff, and I have to eat my words. I usually say if they're using book source content material, the spinoffs are usually not very good because they're going off book, but in this case I have to take it all back. I cried multiple times. I'm only through episode 4 and I can't wait to watch the rest, but today I really need to focus and get down to business, so I need to find probably like a great audiobook to listen to or something like that. Let's go ahead and hop into sewing. We hop into things first thing this morning with doing the little tiny darts in the back. I always find things fit me so much better when I do these. I do want to note though, I'm not using my ruler because I couldn't find it, so instead I'm using this giant block. It is not ideal, but basically the way these darts work is you mark this straight line off the pattern and then you measure 1/8 inch from the edge of the dot, and that's how you get your little dart measurement. And I really wish modern day patterns had these, and I need to remember that I like these because they help with some of like the fluffiness on the back, and I just think end up with a better fit. So definitely a great little add. As much as I love these darts, they are a little tedious when it comes to the machine because it's so close to the edge and you're just going closer to the edge as you get to the bottom. So it can just be a little bit tricky, but I'm just going along and getting it done. And then of course my favorite part of the dart, pressing the dart. These I press inwards towards the center. And with those done, I can now go ahead and match the side seams and the top seams. And then the other thing I'm doing is this bodice comes in 2 pieces, the upper piece that gets gathered and the waistband. And so I am also pinning together a waistband here. All of these use 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And while doing the steps of sewing these together, I'm also putting in my gathering stitches for where I will gather along the bust line. So here it's super simple. I am just sewing 3 rows of gathering stitches. This is how I like to gather. Everybody does a little bit different, but this is what works best for me. Then for seam finishing, I'm going to go ahead and be using pinking shears. I am first cutting and trimming all my seams with them, and then I will of course press them all open. I feel like I've been doing this type of bodice for like a bunch in a row, but the next step is to press these over to get ready to top stitch them down. I'm just pressing them over, again that 5/8 of an inch. I honestly just eyeball it. I'm sure you technically should measure or whatever, but I'm a big fan of an eyeball. That is what I am doing here. And then I thought this dress would be really cute with some piping at the waist to just give it an extra detail, especially since I know the buttons will be white. This will pull more white throughout the garment. So what I'm first doing is I am just basting down that piping to the edge before I go ahead and get ready to attach the bodice. I decided to do both the top side and the waist side since I'm here and working with it, as opposed to like waiting till I am going to do the part that attaches to the skirt later. I just felt like this made more sense. And I'm using my zipper foot. I don't know that I feel like this was the best foot to use, but it was definitely the best foot that I had. And now I am just gathering down the bust for the proper fullness, as well as the little bit in the back, so we're just getting all our notches aligned and everything good to go. And then I am again top stitching this. I am top stitching this as close to the piping as I can get the edge. I just think that's how I'm going to get the best results. And then after I finish that, I go ahead and pull out all the gathering stitches for a nice clean finish at the end. This included both like the gathering stitches and the gathered part, but I also pulled out the basting stitches of the piping and the basting stitches where I put the piping in. I just again think this makes for a nicer finish. And now I am consulting my pattern instructions to make sure I'm about to sew the skirt correctly. I got a little confused on my ups and downs, so I had to take a quick look over at the directions. Once I got that all done, I sat down and sewed some more with Spooky watching very carefully to make sure I'm doing my job correctly. Here I'm just sewing up the side seams, nothing too exciting here, just a couple boring straight stitches, but of course every stitch matters when you sew. And then next up was the pocket. I first went ahead and did a basting stitch so I could make sure I went around the pocket evenly. I've struggled with that in the past, and this also helped me cut my cuts to make it so it's like a little bit more round and has less square corners. And then I'm ironing it. My next step before I do anything else is putting some white piping along the top edge of it. And then with the white piping in, I'm going ahead and I am pinning it down. Then I went ahead and I sewed the pocket down. I'm just sewing pretty close to the edge. I would say about 1/8 of an inch, maybe slightly less. It's really hard to see here because the fabric keeps blocking it, but that is what I'm doing, I promise. And now it's time to gather in the skirt fabric. So I first start by pinning some of the notches to where they should go. I then always now don't do all of my gathering stitches in one row. I make a break usually in the middle, so in this case in the middle back, and I am then just pulling those and getting them all spread out and even in between my pinpoints. I'm also double checking that there's some notches. I'm double checking that those also match up. This is just all our tools to help you get a more even gather. And then with that done, I am yet again going ahead and top stitching that down. I really enjoyed sewing with the piping. This is kind of my first go at it, and I definitely think I will be using it again. With the whole dress basically assembled and needing to do sleeves and finishing details, I'm first starting by finishing the raw edge of what will become the facing. The facing folds over onto the dress, so I am real quick just turning that over by 1/4 inch and sewing it down. Because this is a decently old pattern, instead of providing faces, they expect you to make bias tape, which is perfectly easy. I make mine 1.5 inches because I like to be able to fold it over twice to fully enclose the seam, and that is how I do it. I'm just using my rotary cutter and my quilting tools here, and Spooky's mouse lurks in the background. And then I am pinning my facing in place around the neck. You can see where it folds there, and then where I am putting in that bias tape that I just cut. And then after sewing it down, I'm of course understitching. This just gives it the ability to turn more nicely when I press it, so that way it just looks better and is a more clean seam finish. And then I am ironing it down. It is not laying quite as flat as I would want. Honestly, I should probably pick out the stitches and redo it, but most of it's on the back of the neck and I just can't be bothered, so I'm not going to do that. And then my next job is to also press down the front of the dress to get that ready to sew eventually. It's going to be a little bit before I touch it, but I like to get things pressed kind of as soon as I can because it really helps make a difference in knowing where things go. And now it's time for the sleeves. The first step made me nervous because it was going ahead and cutting over a bunch of different dots essentially. It is not my fave. I did it successfully and in the correct places. I have done this type of sleeve before, as you saw in the dress I did an intro with, so this was not my first rodeo and I was a lot less nervous than the first time I did this type of sleeve. After that, I'm putting in my gathering stitches again 3 rows, where I will be gathering the puffy part of the sleeve. And then I am pinning the front part of the sleeve together and sewing that down again at that 5/8 seam allowance. The way these sleeves are constructed is so interesting, and I really appreciate them because basically to me the goal is to keep the puff very much on the outside and tops the shoulders, and I think that's pretty neat and not a construction you see a lot in modern sleeves. Here you can see my dreamy puff sleeves come into fruition. So I'm gathering this, and if you've seen the part that I sewed together, I've folded over the top just a little bit and then I will pin that down, and that is how this is constructed. Hopefully this is helpful to see. I don't think I see sleeves done too often like this, and so if you do see them, that's a bit tricky. And like I said, this is my second time, so it was less intimidating, but the first time I did these, it was downright scary. And then I am going ahead and I am top stitching that flap down, and we have the foundation of our nice puffy sleeves. The next step is to, of course, then fold the sleeve not in half, but kind of in half, and sew the second seam together so that way those are all good to go. And here I decided to go ahead and put white piping on the sleeves as well. I just felt like it would spread out the detail and be a nice touch. So what I'm first doing is I am sewing it to the right side with then the piping pointing up, and then what I'll do is I'll flip that inward and then top stitch the piping down, and that will be my seam finish. The piping is made out of a bias tape, so I think this makes sense as a seam finish. I guess it's probably not ideal, but it's what I was in the mood for, so is how I finished the sleeve line, and I think it did turn out really cute. And then the next step is to put the gathering lines into the sleeve head, so that way I can ease the sleeve into the bodice. And here I am giving you a horrible angle of me going ahead and gathering in the sleeve head. Sorry, I promise I'm matching all my marks and notches and things, but you can't tell, so you'll never know, I guess. And then after attaching the sleeves, I'm going to be binding them with a seam binding. This is just a purple rayon seam binding I have that I really like, and I am just doing that to keep these seams like nice and enclosed. And also they have the advantage of if I have like where I move too suddenly and a sleeve like rips, it gives me a little bit of backup. I have definitely been known to use that before. And then my next step is to put in the 17 buttonholes. Gee, I am glad I have gotten used to my buttonhole foot. Back in the day, I would have done this by hand or by bound buttonholes. The pattern actually recommends bound buttonholes, but honestly, I don't think I will ever do 17 bound buttonholes on anything that is not a coat. So here I am doing them by machine, quickety, liquidy, split. That is not the saying, but it's fine. Yeah, 17, no way. I'm already going to have enough hand things and hand pain from sewing in 17 buttons. I don't need to figure out how to do 17 buttonholes as well. And then right after that, I'm going ahead and I am putting in fray check onto the buttonholes. I basically do this, I put a little bit of plastic down so that way I won't get the stickiness on my ironing board, and then I just use a fray check in there. I just put the plastic down over an abundance of caution. I don't actually think I usually have it bleed through that much, but no one wants a sticky ironing board, certainly not me. My next step is to turn up the hem and press it and get ready to hand hem it. And I am not doing a double turn here at all because the top is the selvage, so it is already nice and neat. And now I am stitching the hem down. I always enjoy hand sewing, not too much, but just enough to sit down and watch a good TV show while getting this done. And then after this, I am also going to do the facings the exact same way. And it is also time to sew the buttons on. And my last step is to chisel the buttonholes so they are open. And now we're ready for the reveal. I can't wait to show you this dress. So you have seen the reveal. I hope you enjoyed it. I got the wisteria just in time. We had a bit of a heat wave while I was out of town, and I was worried everything would be very shriveled and sad when I got back, but the wisteria was still intact, so we got that footage and I'm very happy. But before we jump into my final thoughts on this pattern and this project, we will first jump into the cost breakdown. So the fabric for this dress was $74.31. That is, I think, for about 5 yards, which I'm pretty good with. This is really high quality vintage material that you can't find anymore. So it being like 12-ish, 13-ish a yard, not too shabby. And then as far as notions, the buttons were $12.92 according to my button calculations. These buttons were probably cheaper because I got them in such bulk, but I've been averaging out every single button I bring in for 70 cents a button, which gives you that $12.92. And the thread was $163, which brings us to notions total of $14.55. And then the pattern was only $16.54, which seems unusually cheap for a pattern this old, but I'll take it. That brings us to a supply total of $105.40. I think this is a fantastic price for such a well-made, beautiful, and unique dress. So let's hop into the labor. This dress was more simple than a lot of my recent projects have been, so I was able to complete it much quicker. I only spent 8 hours and 15 minutes on this, which of course is still obviously like the total of a whole work day, but I am really happy with how I turned out. So if we take that 8 hours and 15 minutes and multiply it by $32.70, which is the living wage in Seattle, we get a total of $269.78 for the labor. So my labor costs obviously are not one-to-one with a factory worker, but I just do want us to consider how much labor should cost in a garments and how artificially cheap our garments are. I mean, it also comes with the fact that the fabric is poor quality, and a lot of times the stitches they use are actually longer, which is an interesting fact that a lot of people don't know. Is a lot of times if you look at the garment you buy, if you look at stitch length, that will indicate quality because it takes more time to sew smaller stitches than bigger stitches, even on a sewing machine. So that's my little labor rant for this video. That brings us to a grand total of $375.18. Honestly, for a high quality bespoke dress, I think that's a great price. Of course, I am not paying myself for the labor, but in theory, this is how much you would need to sell this at, and that does not count any profit that you use to invest back into your business. So yeah, just a reminder that clothing should be more expensive than it is. So with that, we're going to jump up into the wrap up. I have the dress here. Here she is. She's so pretty. I am off the work for the week this week, so I wore her to do some cutting out of fabric and sewing and didn't notice tons of issues. If I did reach my arm up this high, I would feel some constriction. I think next time I make this, I would like to add another inch to the sleeve. I added an inch already, but I just think another inch would really make this better. And then the fit and everything is overall pretty good. I would also drop the bust, which I should just know that I need to do this by now, about a ½ inch to an inch. I might make 2 pockets instead of 1, which I can go back and do easily enough anyway. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. I think it turned out so cute. I'm so happy I finally found wisteria fabric, and now this project that's been sitting in my brain is out in the world and no longer has to be in my brain, and I can have some space for some new projects. So yeah, that is this guy here. I didn't really have any sewing flaws on this one. At this point, I've gotten pretty good. I mean, as far as fit, I don't know if you can tell in the reveal, but there's like kind of some tightness here that's like a line going down, and I don't totally know what that's from. But I think the waist on this fits perfectly. I think it just looks really darn good, and I'm really happy with it. And I'll definitely use this pattern again. I really like the other one with these sleeves too, but I wear that dress all the time, so it'll be good to have another dress like that in my rotation. Like I said, I do wish the sleeves were a little loose. If I feel the need, I might widen them up a bit if I can figure out how to do it. I also think the piping was a nice touch. I'm glad I did the piping. At first I wasn't sure about it because the top of the waistband met the sleeve and it felt kind of like a very strict line across my body. But after seeing it in the footage of the reveal, I think it turned out fine and I'm not bothered by it. And then yeah, I just think this is definitely, I've reached my like level of sewing where a simple project like this, like nothing's gonna go chaotically bad. And I'm not gonna have any of those weird tucks and things that I would get when I started sewing. So this is just my encouragement to you. I have now only been sewing for about like 3.5 years. I will say I sewed, I think somewhere around like 400 hours last year. So like I am sewing a lot of hours a year to get this good. Being good at sewing just comes with repetition. I still wear my first dress. I still own my first dress. I still wear some things from earlier in my sewing journey. So nothing you make now is like guaranteed to not work for you later. But also like you're just gonna get so much better and projects will go smoother the more and more times you follow different patterns and follow different instructions. And that's a super great way to learn. I'm almost completely self-taught and I've basically just learned by following patterns. And I guess watching YouTube videos of other people sewing. But yeah, that concludes this project. I hope you enjoyed. I absolutely love doing this one for you. And as always, you can support my channel by buying me a coffee over on Ko-fi. I have that linked down in the description. It just helps me keep my channel running. And then of course, there are all the free ways to support my channel, such as giving it a thumbs up, commenting down below. And if you haven't subscribed already, you definitely should. I have a lot of really awesome projects coming up and I put out a video every Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. So I'm a regular uploader. You won't have to wait too long to hear from me, and I will see you next time. Bye!